In a frozen city street, a billionaire watched an 8-year-old girl turn her torn coat into a shield for her 2-year-old sister. He almost walked away. That single moment, quiet, brave, unforgettable, would force him to stop, stay, and change everything he thought he knew about warmth, family, and responsibility. Snow fell without urgency, the kind that softened everything it touched. In Maryland, winter had a way of making the city look expensive and lonely at the same time. Streetlights glowed like quiet witnesses. Shop windows shimmered with warmth they never shared. Across from a small noodle shop called Wren and Broth, an 8-year-old girl stood still. Her name was Lila Hart. She wasn't crying. She wasn't asking for anything. She was simply standing in the path of the wind, shoulders squared, holding open a coat that had long stopped doing its job. The fabric was thin, frayed at the edges, patched once too often. Still, she pulled it wider, angling her body so the snow hit her first. Behind that coat sat Maisie, her 2-year-old sister, bundled on a folded blanket. Maisie's boots were too big. Her eyes were heavy with sleep. She leaned into Lila's legs, trusting without question. Lila bent slightly, lowering her voice to a whisper meant only for her sister. "Stay close, okay?" she murmured. "I've got you." Cars passed. Doors opened and closed. Laughter spilled from nearby restaurants and vanished just as quickly. No one stopped. No one stared. The city kept moving as cities do. A black sedan eased to the curb. Inside sat Asher Wren, 36, founder of a tech empire built on speed and certainty. He had just left a winter gala, champagne applause conversations he wouldn't remember. His phone buzzed with another message he didn't read. Through the tinted window, his eyes caught on something small and wrong. Not the children themselves, the way the older one had turned her coat into a roof. Asher's breath caught. "Stop here," he said quietly. The car slowed. Snow whispered against the glass, and for the first time in years, Asher Wren did not look away. Lila Hart had rules. She didn't remember when she made them, only that the world worked better when she followed them. Rules kept things calm. Rules kept Maisie safe. Rule 1, Maisie comes first. Rule 2, don't make noise. Noise makes grown-ups nervous. Rule 3, if someone talks to you, answer politely. Short sentences, no fear. Tonight wasn't supposed to be complicated. They had been at the shelter's evening program, warm lights, plastic cups of juice, a story read too fast. When the snow started falling harder, the volunteer transport texted that they were delayed. Lila had nodded like she understood, even though the word delayed felt bigger than it should. So they waited. Not alone, not forgotten. Just waiting. Maisie tugged at Lila's sleeve, eyes glossy with sleep. "Cold," she whispered. Lila knelt immediately, adjusting the blanket, pulling her coat wider. The coat had once belonged to someone else. It had been warm once. Now it was mostly a promise. "I know," Lila said softly, smiling, because smiles made Maisie feel brave. "It's almost done." She shifted her stance, letting the wind hit her back instead. Snow slipped down her collar, cold and sharp. Lila didn't flinch. She focused on breathing evenly, the way she did when she needed to be strong. Across the street, the noodle shop glowed gold through the window. People inside laughed, leaning close to steaming bowls. Lila didn't resent them. She just noted the distance. A car door opened. Lila noticed immediately. The man who stepped out didn't rush. He didn't tower. He moved carefully, as if the sidewalk might crack under his shoes. His coat was dark and clean. His hands stayed visible. Lila straightened, pulling the coat tighter around Maisie. The man stopped a few steps away. "Hey," he said gently. "Are you two okay?" Lila met his eyes. "We're okay," she answered, voice steady. The man nodded, not pushing. "Are you waiting for someone?" "Yes," Lila said. "For the ride." Snow continued to fall, and the waiting went on. Asher Wren felt the cold differently once he was standing still. It crept up from the pavement, sharp and personal, nothing like the controlled chill of an air-conditioned boardroom. He noticed the way the girl's fingers had gone pink at the knuckles, the way her coat hung open just enough to shield the smaller child behind her. "You can sit inside," he offered quietly, nodding toward the shop behind him. "It's warm. Just for a bit." Lila hesitated, not because she didn't want warmth, because warmth sometimes came with questions, with conditions, with endings she couldn't control. "We're fine here," she said carefully. Asher didn't argue. He lowered himself slightly so his eyes were closer to hers without forcing her to look up. "I'm not trying to move you," he said. "Just, the snow's picking up." Lila glanced down at Maisie. Maisie's eyes were closing now, her small body relaxing in the pocket of shelter Lila had made. A gust of wind swept past, pushing snow against Lila's back. The cold bit harder. Without thinking, Lila shrugged out of one sleeve of her coat, then the other, wrapping the fabric more tightly around Maisie. The movement was quick, practiced. The coat became a tent, a shield, a quiet promise. Asher watched the action land in his chest like a weight. She had made herself smaller so someone else could be warmer. Maisie sighed, settling. "Lila," she murmured, half asleep. "I'm here," Lila whispered instantly. "You're okay." Asher felt something give way inside him. Not pity, recognition. He took off his gloves, rubbing his hands together, searching for the right words. "My name's Asher," he said softly. "What's yours?" Lila looked at him again, really looked this time. "Lila," she replied. Asher nodded. "That's a good name." The snow fell harder, and in the space between them, between a man who had everything and a child who had learned to be a shelter, something fragile and important began to form. Asher Wren hadn't planned to stop. His life moved in straight lines, garage to elevator, elevator to boardroom, boardroom to gala. Pauses were inefficiencies. Standing still on a snowy sidewalk wasn't something his calendar allowed. Yet here he was. The cold slipped through the seams of his coat as he watched Lila keep her body angled against the wind. She didn't complain. She didn't shift impatiently. She simply endured like endurance was a skill she'd practiced. Asher realized something unsettling. He was watching competence. Not desperation. Not chaos. A child managing a situation that shouldn't belong to her. "You're doing a good job," he said, before he could stop himself. Lila looked up sharply, unsure how to take that. "I didn't mean," Asher added quickly, lowering his voice. "I just mean, you're very calm." Lila nodded once, accepting the observation but not the praise. "I have to be." Those 3 words hit harder than any accusation. Asher glanced back at his car. The driver waited patiently, eyes forward, pretending not to see. It would be easy to leave, to assume someone else would step in, to convince himself that systems existed for a reason. But systems were made of people, and people sometimes ran late. "Can I ask you something?" Asher said. Lila's shoulders tensed. "If it's about money we don't need." "It's not," Asher interrupted gently. "I promise." She studied his face, searching for the catch. "Okay. How long have you been waiting?" Lila considered. She didn't know the exact time. She only knew the sky had darkened and the snow had thickened. "A little while," she said. Maisie shifted under the coat, making a small sound. Instantly, Lila adjusted the fabric, tucking it closer around her sister's chin. Asher watched the motion, the instinctive care, the way Lila never stopped tracking Maisie's comfort, even while answering questions. Something in him tightened. He had spent years optimizing systems that predicted human behavior. Yet here stood a child proving that love didn't need algorithms. It just needed someone willing to stand in the cold. Snowflakes gathered in Lila's hair, melting slowly, leaving her curls damp and dark. Asher noticed before she did. "You can come inside?" he said again, carefully. "Just to sit. You can stay right by the window. You'll still see the street." Lila hesitated longer this time. The warmth behind the glass tempted her. She could almost feel it, hear the clink of dishes, smell something rich and comforting. Maisie stirred again, her small body leaning heavier against Lila's leg. Lila knelt, brushing snow from Maisie's sleeve. "Hey," she whispered. "We might go somewhere warm for a minute, okay?" Maisie didn't answer. She just nodded, eyes half closed. Lila looked back at Asher. "We don't go anywhere far," she said firmly. "And we don't close the door." Asher felt an unexpected swell of respect. "Agreed," he said. "No closed doors." He opened the shop door slowly, letting a wave of warmth spill out onto the sidewalk. The contrast was immediate, like stepping from winter into safety. Inside, the noise softened. A few diners glanced over, curious, but not intrusive. Asher lifted a hand to the staff, signaling calm. "Window table," he said quietly. They sat exactly where Lila could see the street. Maisie climbed onto the chair with Lila's help, her feet dangling. The heat wrapped around her, and she let out a tiny, surprised laugh. Asher returned with warm cocoa for Maisie and tea for Lila, nothing fancy, nothing overwhelming. Lila watched him closely as he slid the cup toward her sister. "Thank you," she said, "because manners mattered." Asher smiled, small and genuine. "You're welcome." Maisie wrapped both hands around the mug, sighing happily. "Warm," she announced. Lila smiled, then just a flicker gone almost immediately. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled the fabric closer around herself, still guarding, still ready. Asher sat across from them, hands folded, giving space. He wasn't rescuing anyone. He was waiting with them. And for the first time in years, waiting didn't feel like wasted time. Time slowed in the noodle shop. Steam curled from bowls. A spoon clinked against porcelain. Outside, snow continued its steady fall, indifferent to human schedules. Lila checked the window again. Asher noticed how she counted cars, not randomly, but methodically. Each set of headlights that passed without stopping added weight to her shoulders. "It's okay to ask for an update," Asher said softly. "If you want." Lila shook her head. "They said they're coming." Asher nodded. He didn't challenge her certainty. He simply took out his phone. "Would you like me to call and make sure?" he asked. "Just to confirm. We won't change anything." Lila hesitated. This time she didn't answer right away. Maisie had finished her cocoa and leaned against Lila's side, eyes closed, now completely asleep. Lila adjusted her sister's position automatically, cradling her with practiced care. "Okay," Lila said at last, "but please don't say our names loud." Asher felt a quiet ache in his chest. "I won't." He stepped a few feet away and made the call, speaking low, controlled, respectful. When he returned, Lila was exactly where he'd left her, eyes fixed on the window body curved protectively around Maisie. "They're on their way," Asher said. The storm slowed them down. About 10 minutes. Lila exhaled, not dramatically, but like someone releasing a held breath they hadn't noticed. "Okay," she said again. 10 minutes shouldn't feel long. But when you're 8, 10 minutes can feel like a test. Asher sat back down, keeping his distance. "You did the right thing," he said quietly. Lila looked at him. "What thing? Staying where it was safe? Watching out for your sister?" Lila glanced at Maisie's sleeping face. "That's just what sisters do." Asher swallowed. He thought of all the times he'd walked past something uncomfortable, trusting that responsibility belonged to someone else. Tonight, an 8-year-old had reminded him what responsibility actually looked like. The snow outside thickened. Inside, the warmth held. And in those 10 quiet minutes, something irreversible took root. The understanding that this encounter was not an interruption, but the beginning of something neither of them could walk away from. The door opened softly, letting in a gust of snow and a woman wrapped in a navy coat, dusted white at the shoulders. Her name was Nora Ibarra. She scanned the room, once professional calm, then her eyes found Lila instantly. Relief crossed her face, subtle but real. "There you are," Nora said gently, keeping her voice light. "I'm sorry we're late." Leela straightened as if called to attention. "We waited," she said, not accusing, just stating a fact. Nora knelt beside her, lowering herself to Lila's height. "You did exactly the right thing," she said. "You stayed where it was safe and warm." Maisie shifted in her sleep, murmuring. Lila's hand moved automatically, steadying her sister. Nora's gaze softened at the sight. She turned to Asher. "Thank you for keeping them comfortable," she said. "I'm Nora. I work with the shelter." Asher nodded, respectful. "Asher Wren," he replied. "They were very clear about waiting. I just offered a place to sit." Nora smiled, approving but measured. "That matters," she said. Paperwork followed, quiet and efficient. Names confirmed, pickup delay explained, no raised voices, no blame, just adults doing what they were supposed to do. Lila listened closely, absorbing every word. When Nora said, "We'll head back now," Lila nodded immediately. She didn't cling to the warmth. She didn't hesitate. Maisie stirred as Nora gently lifted her. Lila hovered, close eyes tracking every movement until Maisie settled again. Asher watched from a respectful distance, surprised by the sharp ache he felt as the moment ended. He knelt slightly, catching Lila's attention one last time. "You were very brave tonight," he said. Lila considered that. "I wasn't scared," she replied after a moment. Then quieter, "I just didn't want her to be." Asher smiled, something open and unguarded. "That counts," he said. Lila hesitated, then nodded once. It wasn't goodbye. It was acknowledgement, and as Nora guided the sisters toward the door, Asher stood there longer than necessary, watching the space they left behind, already changed. Asher returned home to a penthouse full of light and silence. He took off his coat, set his keys down carefully, and stood in the middle of the room as if he'd forgotten why he'd come there. Outside, the storm had softened, snowflakes drifting lazily now, harmless and pretty. Inside his mind, it was anything but quiet. He replayed the night in fragments, Lila's steady voice, Maisie's sleepy sigh, the way that torn coat had become a shelter. Asher poured himself a glass of water and didn't drink it. He had seen hardship before from a distance, through reports, through donations with neatly formatted receipts. This had been different. This had been close enough to feel. He sat down at his desk and opened his laptop, intending to distract himself with work. Instead, he searched for the shelter. He read their mission statement, their rules, their emphasis on routine dignity and child safety. He noted the weather contingency plans and the reliance on volunteers. Responsible, careful, human. His phone buzzed a message from his lawyer friend, Evan Park, about a contract review. Asher typed back only 3 words. "Call me tomorrow." He leaned back, closing his eyes. For the first time in years, sleep came slowly, not because he was anxious, but because his mind was full of faces instead of numbers. Somewhere across the city, Lila was likely settling Maisie into a bunk bed, counting breaths until her sister slept deeply. Asher imagined that small hand curling around a blanket, finally warm. He thought of something Nora had said almost offhand. "She's older than she looks." Asher understood what that really meant. Before turning in for the night, he did something unusual. He set a reminder on his phone. Check on shelter donations. Winter supplies. No press. He stared at the last line. No press. No performance. No applause. Just consistency. Asher turned off the lights and stood by the window watching the city glow. The snow had stopped, but the lesson of it was still settling in. 3 days later, Asher returned to the shelter. Not alone, not announced, and not with cameras. He came with a coordinator from his foundation boxes labeled plainly socks, blankets, child-safe books. Nora met him at the door, eyebrows lifting in mild surprise. "You didn't have to come yourself," she said. I wanted to, Asher replied simply. Inside the shelter buzzed with quiet activity, children coloring a volunteer reading aloud the gentle order of a place designed to hold things together. Asher kept his hands in his pockets, resisting the urge to fix everything at once. Then he saw Lila. She sat at a low table, carefully lining up crayons by color. Maisie stood beside her, stacking soft blocks, humming tunelessly. Lila looked up and froze. Her eyes widened just slightly. You came back, she said. As promised, Asher replied, keeping his distance. With permission. Nora nodded from behind him. He checked. That mattered. Lila studied him again, recalibrating. Maisie remembers you, she said. As if on cue, Maisie turned, brightening. Asher, she said proudly. Asher crouched, smiling. Hey, Maisie. She toddled over, holding out a block. Build. Asher accepted it like an invitation to something sacred. They built quietly. No rush, no expectations. Lila watched closely, not suspicious now, but alert. Protective in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with love. After a few minutes, Asher stood. I won't stay long, he said to Lila. I just wanted to say hello and make sure you both had warm things. Lila nodded. Thank you, she said. Then after a pause, the cocoa was good. Asher smiled. I'm glad. As he left, Nora walked him to the door. You're doing this the right way, she said quietly. Asher looked back once more at Lila, now laughing softly as Maisie knocked over their tower. I don't want to rush anything, he said. I just don't want to disappear. Nora met his gaze. Then don't, she replied. Outside, the air was crisp and clear, and Asher Wren understood something new. Sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is come back. Asher told himself he was only observing. That was the word he used, observing, as he sat in the shelter's small conference room, across from Nora Ibarra and 2 staff members. The chairs were mismatched. A box of tissues sat untouched in the center of the table. The atmosphere was calm, professional, and quietly serious. No one raised their voice. That made it harder. We appreciate your continued support, Nora said, hands folded. But I want to be clear about boundaries. Asher nodded immediately. Of course. Nora continued, choosing her words carefully. Children form attachments easily, especially when they've experienced instability. Consistency matters. So does clarity. Asher absorbed that. He had built companies on clarity. He knew how quickly mixed signals could fracture trust. I don't want to confuse them, he said. I'm not here to promise anything I can't keep. Nora studied him for a long moment. Then I'll be honest as well, she said. Lila is highly protective of Maisie. That bond is healthy, but it also means changes affect her deeply. Asher pictured Lila's eyes, alert, watchful, older than 8 should ever have to be. I understand, he said quietly. Nora slid a folder across the table. If you're considering deeper involvement, mentorship, guardianship down the line, this outlines the process. It's long. There are evaluations, home studies, training. Asher opened the folder. He didn't flinch at the pages. He flinched at the timeline. Months, possibly longer. This wasn't a transaction. It was a transformation. I won't rush, Asher said, and I won't bypass procedure. Nora nodded, relieved. Good. Because the goal isn't to change their lives overnight. It's to keep them safe. Asher closed the folder gently. Outside the room, laughter echoed Maisie's unmistakable giggle. Lila's softer laugh followed, cautious but real. Asher stood. May I say hello before I go? He asked. Nora smiled faintly. Yes, but briefly. In the common room, Maisie ran toward him, arms lifted in automatic trust. Asher knelt, catching her gently, careful not to overwhelm her. Lila watched, unreadable. Asher met her gaze. I'm not leaving, he said. I'm just learning. Lila considered that. Then she nodded once. It wasn't permission, but it wasn't resistance either. And Asher realized he was standing on an edge, one step away from a life that would ask more of him than success ever had. Routine settled in quietly. Asher didn't announce visits. He didn't bring surprises. He arrived on the same afternoons, stayed the same amount of time, and left the same way after saying goodbye properly. Lila noticed. She always noticed. She noticed that he asked before sitting beside Maisie, that he waited for Nora's nod before offering snacks, that he never questioned the rules out loud. One afternoon, Lila finally spoke while coloring at the table. "You always come after lunch," she said, not looking up. Asher smiled faintly. "It seems like a good time." Lila pressed a blue crayon hard into the paper. "Some people come once, then they stop." Asher didn't rush to reassure her. He knew better. "I can't promise forever," he said honestly, "but I can promise that when I say I'll come, I will." Lila glanced at him, assessing the weight of that sentence. Maisie climbed into Asher's lap with a picture book curling in easily. The ease of it made Asher's chest ache, not fear, but responsibility. He read slowly, stumbling over voices, earning a soft laugh from Lila despite herself. Afterward, Nora pulled him aside. "You're doing well," she said, "but I need to ask you something." Asher nodded. "Ask." "What happens if this becomes harder than you expect?" Nora said gently. "If evaluations don't go your way. If the process says no." Asher didn't answer right away. He looked across the room where Lila was helping Maisie put crayons away, careful, deliberate, patient. "I don't disappear," he said finally, "even if the answer is no." Nora's shoulders eased. That's what they need to hear. Later, as Asher prepared to leave, Lila walked him to the door. "Maisie sleeps better now," she said quietly. Asher paused. "I'm glad. She still checks for me," Lila added. "But she doesn't cry." Asher swallowed. "Thank you for telling me." Lila hesitated, then asked the question she'd been holding back. "Do you have kids?" Asher met her eyes. "No," Lila said. "Not disappointed. Just curious. You don't look lonely." Asher almost laughed. After he left, Nora watched Lila return to the table posture lighter than before. Consistency, Nora thought. It didn't solve everything, but it changed what tomorrow felt like. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Nora's voice was steady but careful. "Asher, I need to discuss a development." Asher stepped into a quiet hallway. "I'm listening. There's been an inquiry," Nora said. "A distant relative has contacted the agency specifically about Maisie." Asher's chest tightened. "What kind of inquiry? Not hostile?" Nora clarified quickly. "But legally relevant. It means we need to review placement stability." Asher leaned against the wall, grounding himself. "Does that put the girls at risk?" "Not immediately," Nora said. "But it introduces uncertainty." Asher closed his eyes. Uncertainty was something he could manage in business. In children's lives, it felt unforgivable. "What can I do?" he asked. Nora didn't sugarcoat it. "If you want to advocate for keeping them together, it means stepping forward formally. Background checks, training, home evaluation." Asher didn't hesitate. "Start it." There was a pause on the line. "You understand." Nora said carefully that this doesn't guarantee anything. "I know," Asher replied, "but I won't let the possibility of failure stop me from trying." That afternoon, he told Lila. He chose his words, slowly, sitting at her level. "There might be some meetings," he said. "Adults talking, paperwork. It doesn't mean anything bad is happening." Lila listened intently. "Will Maisie stay with me?" she asked. Asher held her gaze. "That's what I'm working toward. And I'll be honest with you every step of the way." Lila nodded, jaw tight. "If it doesn't work," she said quietly, "I'll take care of her." Asher's heart cracked, not from fear, but from the impossible weight of her sense of duty. "You shouldn't have to," he said softly. "That's what adults are for." Lila didn't argue. But for the first time, she let herself lean back in her chair just a little, as if allowing the idea that maybe, just maybe, someone else could help carry the load. And in that small shift, the story crossed a line. It was no longer about kindness. It was about commitment. The letter arrived in a plain envelope. No alarming language, no bold warnings. Just careful words printed in neutral ink words that carried weight precisely because they were calm. Placement review. Sibling stability assessment. Best interest evaluation. Asher read the letter twice before setting it down. He didn't feel panic. He felt gravity. At the shelter, Nora gathered the staff for a briefing. She spoke with the same steadiness she used every day, but the room was quieter than usual. "This is procedural," she said. "It does not mean removal, it means review." Lila sat at the far end of the table, legs swinging just slightly, Maisie beside her, with a stuffed bear tucked under one arm. Lila didn't interrupt. She listened the way she always did, absorbing tone as much as words. Maisie pressed the bear's ear to her cheek. "Sleepy," she murmured. Lila wrapped an arm around her without looking. Nora continued. A distant relative reached out. "The agency is required to respond. That means interviews, home studies, and recommendations." Lila raised her hand, small but certain. "Will Maisie sleep here tonight?" Nora met her eyes. "Yes, and tomorrow, yes." Lila nodded, accepting that answer exactly as it was given. Asher arrived later that afternoon, having cleared his schedule without explanation. He stood near the doorway as Nora summarized the situation again professionally, without drama. Asher asked the questions adults ask when they're trying not to let fear drive the conversation. What's the timeline? What safeguards are in place? How do we protect continuity? Nora answered each one. "Continuity is our priority," she said, "which means consistency. Your involvement helps, but it also raises scrutiny. We must be careful." Asher nodded. "Then we'll be careful." Lila watched him closely. When Nora stepped away, Lila approached Asher with a folded piece of paper in her hand. A drawing, two stick figures holding hands under a crooked roof. "This is us," Lila said, "and that's the roof." Asher crouched, studying it seriously. "That's a good roof," he said. Lila's voice lowered. "They won't take her away if the roof is strong, right?" Asher chose his words with precision. "The grown-ups are deciding how to keep you both safe," he said. "And I'm helping them understand how important it is that you stay together." Lila nodded, lips pressed tight. She didn't cry. She didn't plead. She simply handed him the drawing like a contract. And Asher understood this wasn't about convincing a system. It was about proving that love could be stable. The evaluation didn't feel dramatic. That was the hardest part. No raised voices, no accusations, just a clipboard, a soft-spoken assessor, and questions asked gently but persistently. Asher opened his home with intention. Not the grand rooms, not the view. He showed the small bedroom he'd prepared, neutral colors, child-safe furniture, a nightlight that glowed like a quiet promise. "This room can change," he said, "if they need it to." The assessor nodded, taking notes. At the shelter, Lila sat with Nora in a smaller office. Maisie colored on the floor, humming. "Lila," the assessor said kindly, "I'm going to ask you some questions. You can answer only what you want." Lila sat up straighter. "Okay. How do you help Maisie when she's upset?" Lila answered easily. "I sit with her. I don't leave." "What helps you when you're upset?" Lila paused. Nora waited. "I count," Lila said finally. "Or I draw." The assessor smiled. "Those are good tools." Maisie toddled over and climbed into Lila's lap, interrupting nothing. Lila wrapped her arms around her sister instinctively, the way some people breathe. The assessor watched that moment longer than she watched the answers. Later, Asher met with the assessor separately. "Why are you willing to take this on?" she asked. Asher didn't reach for rehearsed language. Because I've seen what happens when responsibility is delayed, he said. And I don't want these girls waiting for adults to decide if they matter. The assessor tilted her head. Do you understand that love alone doesn't qualify someone? Yes, Asher replied. That's why I'm doing the work. That evening, after everyone left, Lila asked Nora the question she'd been holding all day. Did I say the right things? Nora knelt beside her. There are no right answers, she said. Just honest ones. Lila nodded slowly. When Asher said goodbye that night, Lila surprised him by speaking first. You didn't leave early, she said. Asher smiled gently. I told you I wouldn't. Lila studied his face, searching for cracks, finding none. She didn't smile, but she didn't brace herself either. And that for Lila was progress. The shelter was quiet after lights out. Lila lay awake, counting the soft breaths beside her. Maisie slept, curled against her fingers, hooked into Lila's sleeve like an anchor. Tomorrow was another meeting, another room, another set of adults deciding things that felt enormous. Lila stared at the ceiling and tried not to think too far ahead. She whispered, barely audible, I won't let go. Maisie shifted, murmuring something unintelligible, then settled again. Across the city, Asher sat alone at his dining table, papers spread out neatly. Forms, schedules, training certificates, every box checked. And still he felt unprepared. Not for the process, for the possibility that doing everything right might not be enough. He closed the folder and leaned back, exhaling slowly. In his mind, he saw Lila standing in the snowcoat, held open like a vow. He wondered how many nights she had done that made herself smaller, so someone else could feel safe. The thought settled heavy and permanent in his chest. Asher picked up his phone and typed a message to Evan Park. If tomorrow doesn't go our way, we keep showing up. The reply came quickly. Always. At the shelter, Nora made one last round, checking doors, turning down lights. She paused at Lila's bunk. You awake? She asked softly. Lila nodded. Tomorrow might feel long, Nora said, but you won't be alone. Lila hesitated, then asked the question she'd avoided all week. If they say only one of us can go. Nora waited. Lila swallowed. Will Maisie be okay? Nora felt her throat tighten. She kept her voice steady. Maisie will always be cared for, she said, and so will you. Lila turned on her side, facing Maisie. That's good, she whispered. Nora stood there longer than necessary, watching the sisters breathe in sync. Outside, the city rested under clear skies. Tomorrow decisions would be made with careful language and official stamps. But tonight was held together by a small arm around a smaller body and the quiet promise of someone finally ready to carry the weight. Family court did not look the way Lila imagined. There were no raised platforms, no heavy gavels, no drama carved into dark wood. The room was smaller, brighter, almost ordinary rows of chairs, a long table and a window letting in pale morning light. That somehow made it scarier, because ordinary rooms were where quiet decisions happened. Lila sat beside Nora Ibarra, feet dangling above the floor. Maisie sat on her lap, clutching her stuffed bear, calm in a way only a 2-year-old could be when she trusted the arms holding her. Across the room sat Asher Wren beside Evan Park, his lawyer. Asher wore a simple suit, no watch, no visible wealth. His hands rested flat on the table, steady. He didn't look at the judge yet. He looked at Lila, not to ask for anything, just to be there. The judge entered without ceremony and took her seat. Her voice was even practiced gentle, in a way that suggested she understood the weight of her role. We are here to review placement stability and guardianship eligibility, she said. Our priority is the well-being of the children. Lila listened carefully. She understood more than most adults expected. The social worker spoke first, outlining timelines, shelter records, school reports. Words like continuity, attachment, consistency floated through the room like fragile glass. Then the distant relative's inquiry was addressed not with accusation, but acknowledgement. The judge emphasized that no immediate changes were being made. This was about clarity, not disruption. Asher was invited to speak. He stood slowly, deliberately, as if each movement mattered. "I'm not here to claim ownership of anyone's life," he said. "I'm here to offer stability, and to accept responsibility if the court allows it." The judge studied him. "You understand that guardianship is not a reward?" "Yes," Asher said. "It's a promise." She nodded slightly. Nora spoke next, advocating with precision and care. She spoke of Lila's protectiveness not as a burden but as evidence of resilience. She spoke of Maisie's need for familiar presence, routine, and emotional safety. The judge listened. Then she turned her attention to Lila. "Lila," she said kindly, "you don't have to say anything today. But if you want to tell me what makes you feel safe, I'll listen." Lila's fingers tightened around Maisie's sleeve. She looked at Nora. Nora nodded gently. Lila stood. Her voice didn't shake, but it was quiet, like she didn't want to disturb the room. "I feel safe when Maisie is with me," she said, "and when people tell me the truth." The judge smiled softly. "Thank you." Lila sat back down, heart pounding. Nothing had been decided yet, and that waiting, that careful, respectful waiting, was its own kind of storm. The judge reviewed notes silently for a long moment. The room breathed. Finally, she looked up again, this time at Lila. "There is something I need to ask," she said gently. "And you can tell me if you'd rather not answer." Lila nodded once. In situations like this, the judge continued, adults sometimes discuss many possibilities, including ones that are difficult to imagine. "Have you heard any of those discussions?" Lila hesitated. "Yes," she said quietly. "And how did that make you feel?" Lila looked down at Maisie. Maisie was tracing the edge of her bear's ear, peaceful, unaware of how many futures were being balanced around her. Lila swallowed. "I didn't like it," she said. "But I listened." The judge nodded. "Can you tell me what you're hoping for?" The room went very still. Lila's mind raced not with fear but with calculation. She had done this before, decided things quickly, put someone else first. She lifted her head. "I want Maisie to be warm," she said. "I want her to sleep without waking up scared." The judge smiled gently. "And you?" Lila paused. Then she said the sentence that changed the air in the room. If you can only choose one of us." Her voice grew smaller, but it didn't break. "Please choose Maisie." Asher's breath left him in a sharp, silent rush. He lowered his head, one hand pressed to his mouth, not to hide tears, but to stay still, to not make this moment about him. Evan stared at the table, jaw tight. Nora closed her eyes briefly. The judge didn't respond immediately. She let the words exist. "Lila," the judge said finally, her voice softer now, "thank you for telling me that. It tells me something very important about you." Lila blinked. "What?" "That you love your sister very much," the judge said, "and that you've been carrying a responsibility that does not belong to you." Lila didn't argue. She didn't need to. The judge turned to Asher. "Mr. Wren," she said, "are you prepared to support both children, not because one asked for it, but because it is right?" Asher looked up, eyes clear despite the tears. "Yes," he said, without hesitation. The judge nodded slowly. The room seemed to exhale. No ruling yet. But something fundamental had shifted. This was no longer a discussion about logistics. It was a recognition of love and the quiet injustice of asking a child to sacrifice herself for it. Court adjourned for a short recess. No one spoke. Lila sat perfectly still, arms wrapped around Maisie, as if the world might tilt if she let go. Maisie yawned, resting her head against Lila's chest, entirely untroubled. Asher moved slowly, giving space, honoring the moment. Nora knelt beside Lila. "You were very brave," she whispered. Lila shook her head. "I wasn't brave," she said. I was just honest. That's the same thing, Nora replied gently. Across the room, Asher leaned against the wall, staring at nothing. He felt hollowed out, not empty, but changed, like something old and rigid had finally broken open. Evan approached quietly. You okay? He asked. Asher nodded once. She shouldn't have had to say that. No, Evan agreed. But because she did, things will change. The judge returned her expression thoughtful. Everyone stood. She took her seat and folded her hands. I want to be clear, she said. This court does not make decisions based on emotion alone, but we also do not ignore it. She spoke of evaluations reports' consistency, of the importance of sibling bonds and the demonstrated commitment shown over time. Then she said the words Lila would remember forever. This court recognizes the exceptional bond between these sisters. Lila's heart thudded. The recommendation, the judge continued, is continued placement together under a structured guardianship plan with a clear path forward, provided all benchmarks are met. Lila squeezed Maisie without realizing it. Maisie laughed softly, thinking it was a game. Asher closed his eyes, not in relief, in gratitude. The judge looked directly at Asher. This is not the end, she said. It is the beginning of responsibility. Asher nodded. I understand. Court adjourned. No applause, no speeches, just a quiet room where a child no longer had to choose between herself and the person she loved most. As they stepped into the hallway, Lila looked up at Asher. You heard me, she said. Yes, Asher replied. I did. And you didn't leave, Lila added. Asher crouched to her level. I won't, he said. Not now, not later. Lila studied his face for a long moment. Then slowly, she leaned her head against his shoulder. Just for a second. Just long enough to believe. And in that hallway, under fluorescent lights and ordinary walls, something extraordinary settled into place. A future where love was no longer something an 8-year-old had to carry alone. The decision didn't feel loud. There was no moment where the world snapped into a different shape. No dramatic shift in the air. Just a steady, careful confirmation that the path forward would be walked together. Lila learned what that meant in small ways. It meant packing the same backpack for both of them. It meant schedules written on a whiteboard instead of whispered guesses. It meant Maisie sleeping through the night without waking to check if someone was still there. Asher learned it too. He learned that responsibility arrived quietly early mornings, slow breakfasts, calendars built around school drop-offs instead of meetings. He learned that children didn't need grand gestures. They needed predictability. On the first night Maisie slept in the new room, Asher sat on the floor outside the door longer than necessary. Not because he was afraid, but because he didn't want to rush the moment. He listened to the soft rhythm of breathing on the other side, grounding himself in the sound. Lila watched him from the hallway. You don't have to stay there, she said. Asher smiled gently. I know. She waited. He stayed anyway. Over the following weeks, routines solidified. Lila chose where to put her books. Maisie claimed the bottom drawer of the dresser for socks she insisted on arranging herself. Asher learned the difference between helping and hovering. One afternoon, Lila sat at the kitchen table, homework spread out neatly. Asher worked nearby, laptop closed, simply present. Do we still have meetings? Lila asked. Yes, Asher said honestly, for a while. Lila nodded. That's okay. She hesitated, then added, They said it's good we're together. Asher met her eyes. They were right. Lila looked down, twisting her pencil. I don't have to choose anymore, she said, not as a question but as a realization. Asher felt something settle deep in his chest. No, he said softly. You don't. Later that night, as he tucked Maisie in, she reached for his sleeve. Stay, she asked. Asher nodded. I'm here. And for the first time since the snowstorm, Lila fell asleep without listening for footsteps, secure in the knowledge that staying together was no longer something she had to earn. Spring came slowly to Maryline. Snow melted into narrow streams along the sidewalks, and sunlight found its way back into places it had abandoned. The city felt less sharp, less hurried. So did the house. Asher discovered that warmth wasn't something you controlled, it was something you maintained. It lived in small rituals, pancakes on Sundays, library visits on Wednesdays, bedtime stories read twice because Maisie liked to interrupt. Lila thrived quietly. She joined a school art club. She hung drawings on the refrigerator without asking permission. She began correcting Asher's pronunciation of certain words, a small but significant act of confidence. One evening, Asher found her standing in the hallway staring at a framed photograph he hadn't noticed before. It showed the night of the storm, not a real photo, but a simple illustration based on Lila's drawing. Two figures under a crooked roof of fabric snow falling around them. "You put it up," Asher said. Lila nodded. "So I remember what he asked. That I can do hard things," she said. Then she looked at him. "But I don't have to do them alone anymore." Asher felt his throat tighten. Maisie toddled in, dragging a blanket behind her. She wrapped it around Asher's legs with great seriousness. "Warm," she declared. Asher laughed softly and crouched to her level. "Yes, very warm." Later, Nora visited for a scheduled check-in. She observed quietly, noting the way Lila spoke freely, the way Maisie moved without hesitation. "This feels stable," Nora said as she prepared to leave. Asher nodded. "It feels real." Nora smiled. "That's usually how stability feels." After she left, Lila sat beside Asher on the couch. "You're different now," she said matter-of-factly. Asher raised an eyebrow. "Different how you listen more," Lila said. "And you don't rush." Asher considered that. "I learned from someone very good at it." Lila smiled fully openly without caution. Outside, the evening light softened the street. Inside, warmth lingered not from heaters or walls, but from the quiet certainty that this life, imperfect and real, was finally shared. The coat hung in a shadow box at the end of the hallway. It had been cleaned, repaired, and carefully preserved, not as a symbol of hardship, but as a reminder of courage. The fabric was still thin, the stitching still visible. Lila stood in front of it one afternoon, Maisie beside her. "That was mine," Maisie said proudly. Lila smiled. "It was mine first." Asher approached slowly. "Do you want to keep it there?" he asked. "Or we can put it away." Lila shook her head. "It's okay there." She reached up, touching the glass lightly. "It reminds me that I protected her." Asher crouched beside her. "And it reminds me," he said, "that I needed to learn how to stay." Lila thought about that. "You stopped walking away," she said. "Yes," Asher replied. "I did." Maisie climbed into his lap, pointing at the frame. "Snow," she said. "Yes," Asher agreed. "Snow." That night, Asher read the same book he always did. Maisie insisted on it. Lila lay on her bed nearby, sketching quietly. When the lights dimmed, Lila spoke softly into the dark. "Thank you," she said. Asher paused at the doorway. "For what? For seeing us?" Lila answered. Asher swallowed. "You showed me how." Years later, Asher would tell the story carefully, never for attention, never for praise. Just as an explanation for why he believed in showing up even when it was inconvenient. But tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight, there was only the steady breathing of two sisters, safe and together. And a man who finally understood that the smallest acts, standing still, waiting, offering warmth, could change the direction of a life. Not with noise, but with love that stayed. Did this story leave a lasting impression on you? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment, rate it from 1 to 10, and tap the end screen to see another heartwarming story waiting for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, then tap the bell icon so you don't miss any new stories. Until our next story.